This is What the Floor from T&A Supply Company, Inc., a podcast for the flooring industry. I'm Holiday Van Aram.
And I'm Michael Gurria. We're going to explore the hot topics of the flooring industry with a little humor and a new set of eyes. Good afternoon, Holiday. How are you?
Hi, Michael. I'm pretty good.
Yeah?
Yes.
Anything new this week?
It's a beautiful day outside. The sun is starting to come out. Tony's here with us, too. We are finally getting unburied from meetings and millions of emails, so we're feeling like we're accomplishing things the last few days.
Progress is happening?
Yes. I feel like I've gotten 2 weeks worth of work done in the last 3 days by not having meetings. It's glorious.
Yeah.
Good. Well, we've got an exciting new podcast today. We've got one of our own going over a new topic.
This is a topic requested by a listener. One of the handful of things that we've received that we put on the list of stuff we want to get to, and we finally found the right person to talk to us about it.
We did, and he was willing to come and chat with us. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
Yes.
Happy to be here.
Good.
So Jim Partridge of T&A Supply. Can you introduce yourself to us? Give us a little background history of who Jim Partridge is.
Jim Partridge is a T&A Supply employee, but I've got about 30 years in the business now. I actually started the day after I graduated high school working for a floor covering supply distributor. That location is now a T&A Supply location, but it wasn't at the time. It was called G&M Wholesale. From there, I kind of progressed into installation, installed for some years, and then went to work in manufacturing, where one of my positions was selling substrate prep.
He's got a lot of knowledge, I can tell already.
Yeah, I feel good about this.
The one thing, though, that I do love is that Jim can't get away from T&A Supply.
Yeah.
Which is the story of many of us. You have some kind of like weird connection to the company. You leave, you come back, you just can't get away from us. So we're happy to have you back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back, and I want to be here at T&A Supply. I started off in the sundry business or installation supplies. It's kind of been my passion my whole life, and I'm excited to be a part of it here at T&A.
So we really want to tackle the subfloor prep and self-leveling topic today. That's kind of where we want to go. Hopefully that resonates with people. From my own experience, it's one of those things where people say self-leveler, and I go, what does that mean? So we need a professional to help us walk through subfloor prep and self-leveler 101.
Well, I'm happy to do that. Certainly self-leveling wasn't my passion when I started installing, but as the industry has grown and changed, we see a lot more hardwood installed. We see a lot more large format tile. And so the floors, are being requested that they be flat and smooth. Really, that has created an industry that we didn't used to talk about. It used to be somewhat swept under the rug by the general contractor or the building owner, and now it's being required, and we see the difference in the finished product that we have out there, and it's become a very important part of what we do.
So you mentioned some standards there. Is there specific standards that every installation the subfloor has to meet to be code or get the warranty that is required on the flooring? The subfloor is in its own a project, and then you're installing over the top of it. So what is the standard for what that subfloor needs to be like before you put the floor down?
Without getting too detailed, a concrete general contractor will have what they call a floor flatness number, and that will tell them exactly what the unevenness of the floor can be. So we see a lot of different standards and different types of floor covering. When I first started in the industry, we really had sheet vinyl, glue down carpet or broadloom carpet, and now we have large format tile, hardwood being more specified. We have LVT, LVP, laminate, and those require certain standards. And so the probably the most common standard is for hardwood, which is 1/8 and 10, just an 1/8 of an inch difference in height or depth, I guess, and 1/8 of an inch change within a 10-foot period. So if we go, if I have a 10-foot straight edge and there's an 1/8 of an inch difference in any part of that straight edge, that would be within spec. But if it's over that, it would be out of spec.
And that's what would then cause potential issues, is being out of that spec.
Right. Yep. We did a project, the Portland International Airport, and they had a 10-foot straight edge, and they had a pencil that was 3/8 of an inch thick. And at any time, if that pencil could go below that straight edge, they were required to pour self-leveling and put the floor back in spec. So it ended up being a nice job. There was a lot of pencils going under a lot of straight edges. Some of them might have been shaved down by me, but I don't, for the most part, it was all legit. And so most slabs don't necessarily meet that, or they have a challenge meeting that. We've also seen in the last 20 years, the concrete industry is faster and faster. So what they do is they're able to put a building up much quicker. We don't allow for the slab to cure completely before we see floor covering. So we see moisture issues and things like that, which is another part I'm sure we'll discuss. But we also see not necessarily the workmanship, but the speed that it's going. You know, slabs can curl, they change. I've always been told that concrete is a living, breathing thing, and that it will change with the environment or as it cures, as that moisture comes out of it. And so generally what we see is whatever is specified for floor covering, the substrate will need to meet that floor flatness and moisture content, smoothness.
I think I have a better understanding of what we're talking about.
We're getting somewhere now. So it is necessary for both commercial and residential.
Absolutely. So, right now we see a lot of LVP. I mean, it's the most popular type of floor covering that we see. We also see a lot of laminate. You know, in a typical home, that floor is going to be flat enough, but we may have seen some remodeling or some flooring that's been tore out. And so if we have an uneven floor, if it's a click-together floor, it can actually affect the mechanism that's there. We can see some failures with separation. We can see some unevenness where we have movement in the floor because there's an air pocket there. We see mostly substrate prep specified in a commercial application, but it's still going to be needed, in a residential application. And then, of course, commercial does meet residential. I've done a lot of high-rise condominium projects with leveling, and of course, that would be a residential situation, but really in a commercial project.
Right. Just to stick with the residential for a minute, who is responsible for floor flatness?
Well, that's where the fingers start getting pointed all over the place. And so it's become more accepted. We see the need. We've seen the failures of what happens when we don't have a smooth, flat floor. And so really it's depending on the project. So in a residential situation, it's going to be something that the installer needs to notify the homeowner or the owner of the building that they have an issue or it's not meeting the specification of what the floor covering is and that they need to do something about it. And of course, they'll give them a price on that or what needs to be done.
In theory, the installer should be the one at least starting the conversation when they go to do the installation, seeing or testing and finding that the floor is not going to meet that flatness.
It could be something that is drawn up by the salesperson who's selling the floor covering. If they see that, we just don't see that expertise always in the residential side where we do in the commercial side. So again, 10, 15, 20 years ago, the commercial contractor really didn't want to get involved with the floor prep. They just wanted that to be involved in their original bid. However, they're seeing as times change that those things need to meet that specification. And so they're getting in front of it so that the installation contractor either knows what his scope of work will be or it's being taken care of beforehand.
Let's just scenario here. A homeowner goes into one of our customers, a residential flooring store, and they're picking out products and they settle on the one they want. And, our customer will gladly sell it to them. And they've never seen the home. They've never seen the subfloor. How would they know, or would they ever know, to talk to them about subfloor prep?
Well, subfloor prep, it covers a lot of different things. It could be just some patching, some patching or some ramping, things like that. And those are things that an installer is going to know that he may or may not have to take care of when he gets to the project. The homeowner or the salesperson is generally not going to realize that their floor is out of spec. In most cases, when we have a wood substrate, they're not out of spec unless there's been some settling of the home or there's been some other type of issue where they've remodeled, added on to the home, or they've got multiple floor coverings. And so those things can be taken care of on site by the installer. The homeowner's not going to know because generally there's floor covering already there and they may have not taken that up to see what's going on underneath.
So you used two buzzwords, patching and ramping.
Yeah, so my next question was going to be, what are the different types of prep that you're going to run across? So let's do it.
So patching is something that, of course, we've been doing forever, where we take either a gypsum-based or cement-based compound and we mix it with water and we create a patching compound very similar to what we would do on drywall. It's just made of something different. So we're out to smooth the substrate so that the floor covering can go down. Ramping is where we try to make a difference in elevation not as noticeable.
Okay.
And so we're going to take that half inch. There's actually an ADA specification of what it can be, and that's how many inches or quarter of an inch or 1/16 of an inch per foot rise over that distance. So say we've got a 1/2 inch rise, we want to take that out, 4 feet so that the person doesn't notice it, and then also that it doesn't cause any issue with the finished floor covering.
Okay, so patching and ramping. I have a question about patching. When is it too much patching where you should be doing something different? Is there a hole that's too big to be patched? When do you know that patching's not the fix here?
First of all, if it's a large area, we're going to want to do something different. The other is a lot of times, believe it or not, it's the comfort level of the person doing the work. So when I first started with the manufacturer that I worked for that is now at T&A Supply, we would have people that would patch large areas where we could also show them how to self-level those areas much faster, much easier, and maybe not have to do as many coats. So going back to drywall, for some reason people are much more familiar with drywall patching than they are with floor patching, where you have to do multiple coats in order to get the final product that you would like. And so installers, in some cases, will do multiple coats of patching, even over large areas, to get that area smooth enough for what they want their finished floor covering to be, where they could also use self-leveling. But it really depends on the comfort level of the person doing the work. And so I think there's been really a push to do more self-leveling because it can be done with one pass. They get better results, and ultimately it is easier. But again, if somebody is not familiar with that, they generally stray away from that.
So when we talk self-leveling, we're doing an entire area.
Correct.
Over just patching, which is kind of spot, filling little areas that need some sort of rise or...
Generally, a patching is done, where it might be just, in a residential situation where they have a wood substrate, they may just be patching the joints.
Okay.
Or they may be patching some imperfections in the floor, or they could be filling a small area. Say if I had a hole in the floor of a concrete that was 1/4 of an inch deep, but it was over a 3 or 4 foot area, I may not patch that because it's a lot. And so it's going to be a lot of product. And so there are other ways to do that. But again, it goes to the comfort level and what the scope of the job is. If it's a residential area, we don't see as much self-leveling in residential areas as we do patching.
Okay.
Okay. Here's my next question. What is self-leveling?
Great. So it's actually not a very good description of the product because in a lot of cases, self-leveling underlayments traditionally have not been what we would call self-leveling, meaning if I mix a product and it's fluid and I pour it out, that would mean I wouldn't have to move it or touch it or do anything with it, which would call self-leveling. In a lot of those products, we actually have to manipulate it over the area that we're working with and get it to the right thickness in the right area. We have to move it around and do some things to where it gets to the point where we get the finished product that we would want. Some products are more fluid than others, depending on the manufacturer of the product or the formulation of the product. And so ultimately what we would like when we buy that is to pour something out, let it seek its own level like a glass of water. And then be able to have that harden and be smooth and ready for floor covering. And so a lot of trainings are done, to teach people how to manipulate these products and get the desired result that they would like to have. But self-leveling underlayment is really a product that generally is used on concrete. We do see it used on wood occasionally in order to prepare a floor for finished floor covering over a larger area.
Are there certain products that are more susceptible to need self-leveling versus others? Is it thickness that determines that? For instance, a thin LVP, let's say it's a 4.5 overall thickness versus a 3/4 inch solid hardwood. Do they have different standards? Will that LVP need more self-leveling versus the 3/4 inch solid hardwood, or they all kind of need to be within the same realm?
Yeah, it really depends on what the specification is. So a lot of times we see LVP will somewhat conform to the ungulation of the floor more than a hardwood would. So the other thing we see is that I guess customers are becoming more in tune with what the floor prep will give them for their finished product. I was on a project, it was many years ago when I first started with the manufacturer, where one hallway had been patched prior to sheet vinyl and the other hallway they had started using some self-leveling. And as I stood at the nurse's station along with the contractor, we could look down one hallway and see some ungulation in the floor. And as you look down the hallway that had used self-leveling, it was perfectly flat. It was very, very smooth. And so what it comes down to is generally patching compound is put down with a trowel that's 12 to 14 inches long, where self-leveling, there's no trowel marks, and so it's going to be finished. So depending on how, as you said, how thick the floor is, so sometimes the thinner the floor, the more we see that ungulation or what is done underneath. Where hardwood, we really just want to have a flat floor, but we want to have a smooth floor when it comes to a thin material. So we used to do a lot of Target stores when I installed, and we would be walking down one of the aisles, and it looked like there was literally a boulder underneath one of the tiles. And so we would pull that tile up. In a lot of cases, we couldn't even find the tiny little pebble that was under there, but it looked like somebody had left a watch under there. And so very minor imperfections in a floor, depending on the floor, can really make a big impact on what the look of the floor is. And so there's a lot of different aspects to substrate prep. Whether the floor needs to be flat, the floor needs to be smooth. In some cases, the floor actually does need to be level. We've done some TV stations, MRI rooms, where they wanted what we would call perfectly level floors so that the camera equipment could roll around, or maybe it's the MRI equipment could roll around, things like that. And so they had to be, they had to meet that specification.
What are the best practices for somebody who is using self-leveling? Are there certain things that you have to do this, you have to use this? Are there certain things that this is the best practice, and maybe where you see people trying to cut corners and they're really kind of missing the mark on it?
Well, one of the things we used to always tell contractors when we would do trainings was, follow the instructions on the bag.
Oh, really?
Imagine that.
It's one of those simple ones that a lot of times gets overlooked. These products have about 18 ingredients in them, and they're very, very finite, some of them. Some of them in a 3,000-pound batch are put in by ounces. And so it's very critical that you use the right amount of water and follow the manufacturer's instructions. The other is, I used to get the question all the time, do I need to use primer with self-leveling? And the answer was always yes, and it didn't even matter what they were using, because it was a very important part of that installation, and that they follow those instructions. The other is to look at the area that they're doing and not bite off too much of an area. Self-leveling underlayment is a product that doesn't have a lot of what we call open time, meaning it doesn't flow or self-level for a long period of time. It's important that they only bite off what they can chew in a period of time. I've had customers that would call me and tell me that they went to lunch and they came back and they really couldn't do anything with the product. And I said, well, how long were you gone at lunch? And he said, an hour. And I said, well, it only has 15 minutes. You can work with it. So I'm not surprised that didn't work out. And so, each product is going to have its individual challenges, but a lot of times if we follow the instructions on that, we can really eliminate that. And that's me included. I installed for 15 years. I can remember a time where I would do a laminate floor, and we would have some challenges, and then about halfway through, we would sit down and read the instructions, and the rest of that project went very, very well. Right. And so if I can give anybody any advice on that, it would be to follow the instructions from the manufacturer.
What happens if they don't? Are there things that they can do to go back in time and fix the situation, or they just need to put another level over the top of what they've done?
So if they don't follow the instructions, it certainly that's a wide open question. So it would depend on which instructions.
Yes.
When I say that all of these products need primer prior to using a self-leveling product, I've actually there's been customers that put the self-leveling in the product rather than prime the floor prior, and so that's a challenge that we can't get past. But in most cases, if they do the primer and they follow the instructions there, and they've just had some challenges during the installation, they can, put on another layer, or they can go back and maybe take a little bit of that area up. And there's always going to be environmental factors, sunlight coming in a window, or maybe it was a hot day, or they didn't have water on site. We actually had a project in Hawaii where I think they were on the 25th floor, and they were pumping our self-leveling underlayment, and the plumber shut the water off. For a period of 2 hours. And so if you can imagine the self-leveling underlayment that was in all of the hoses that they were using to pump the product, it was in the actual pump, and then of course it was on the floor. And so I was instructed to air freight some new hoses as quickly as possible to Hawaii the next day because everything was ruined.
Right.
And so, those are challenges. They're environmental factors or issues that are on a job that aren't necessarily, I guess, attributed to the installer or following those instructions. And so there are ways to repair a job. They're just, as with anything, they're not always going to be the most convenient.
Jim might have to be on episode 2 or the second part of the horror stories.
Horror stories, yes. October 2023.
I have a pretty good list. I don't know if
I'm sure you do.
It's all Jim. Okay, so if I'm the guy who went to lunch, I mean, I'm screwed, right? And I've just got to figure out what's the least expensive way to solve this problem.
Right, because what's going to happen is, the products are made to flow for anywhere from 20 minutes to maybe 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And so after that, they start to gel. And then after that, they get hard, like cement. And so that we can put floor covering over them. And so generally what has happened is it's still going to be in that green stage. And so they'll either need to wait until it cures or just start tearing it up at that point. But there are ways that they can, adjust to that. But I think the moral of that story would be that it's best to learn as much as you can, attend the clinics that many of these manufacturers put on, read the instructions, and try to be as prepared as you possibly can. Self-leveling has always been somewhat intimidating because it's something new, but most of the people that I've had interaction with, once they learn how to do it, they tend to do it on a daily basis. They just absolutely love using the product because it makes their job so much easier.
So once they get comfortable with it, they can get it down, and then they know their installation will go smoother and easier, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And smoother being the key word.
Right.
And so,
Buzzword.
So, a lot of times when we patch and we put multiple coats of patching compound on a substrate, getting it ready for finished floor covering, we have to sand it in between, and there's a process of cleaning it up and vacuuming and things like that. Where self-leveling, we can pour it. But once it cures, it's very smooth. Generally don't have to sand it. And we're ready for finished floor covering. And so it makes that job just that much easier.
What part does moisture play? So let's say you're going over concrete and you have a wet pad still. How long do you have to wait? What does it need to be at before you put self-leveler down?
So now we'll get into a little more technical. Moisture has really become, I can remember when I first started installing, moisture wasn't really an issue. And I think for the most part, it was because we had floor covering that wasn't as moisture sensitive. We had broadloom carpet like we discussed before, where that product could breathe, that moisture could come out of it. We were using solvent-based adhesives, and so now we have water-soluble adhesives, so when we have moisture, it's a problem. Really, I think most manufacturers in self-leveling cement patching compounds refer to what the finished floor covering is going to be. There are products that will allow for high moisture. We carry some of those products at T&A Supply. Quick plug. And so, those products can handle high moisture. We just need to make sure that the adhesive that's going to be used can handle high moisture and that the finished floor covering can handle high moisture. So obviously you don't want the floor to be wet. We really want the floor or the substrate to meet the criteria that the finished floor covering is going to meet. And of course, that's quite a wide range. So if we think there's, too much moisture, we certainly want to test, and we want to make sure that it meets all the standards of the adhesive, the floor covering, and if it will meet those, it will most likely meet the self-leveling or patching compound.
This might be a dumb question, but I hear you saying high moisture products, but what is the difference between high moisture and too much water?
High moisture never means water.
Okay.
If we have water, then there's definitely going to be a problem.
Okay.
I always say, moisture in concrete is a lot like somebody who lives in Seattle. When the sun comes out, so do we. We just kind of go out. And so that's kind of what happens with moisture. When the building gets warm, the moisture vapor, not actual water, but the moisture vapor kind of travels and says, I want to be warm too. And it comes up through the concrete and it stabilizes. And so those things can affect our floor covering. They can affect the adhesive. And so high moisture is measured by a couple different things. It's measured by a calcium chloride test, which measures the weight of the moisture, or the relative humidity, which is basically the atmosphere that's out in the concrete. So at any time, if those meet certain levels, then we would consider that high moisture.
Okay. I feel more comfortable about it.
That one is a complicated one. And, at one time I had to read a book on Portland cement, and I wouldn't recommend it. It's not the most interesting book I've ever read. It is very interesting. We, in the floor covering industry, we always look down when we walk. And so concrete is very interesting. It's a living, breathing thing, and it changes over time. And we see so many different things. A lot of times I feel like I'm a little investigator, trying to see what's going on with a floor, and it's kind of fun, But a lot of times we see moisture is an issue, and we haven't seen that before. 20 years ago, we didn't worry about it, and now we worry about it on every project.
So we did not talk about this buzzword that he used a few times, and so I want to circle back to it. What is primer? How does it use? When do you use it? Why are you using it?
With patching compounds, we don't use primer so much. It's got a product. It's generally polymer modified. So if we're just patching a substrate, we're not going to use a primer. But whenever we're using a self-leveling underlayment, primer is generally a polymer modified liquid that is designed to kind of prepare the floor. So in a lot of cases, concrete is very porous, and so we want to use a bonding agent, and that primer is a bonding agent for the self-leveling underlayment. In early days, they used what we called SSD, surface saturation dry. So the primer was actually water. So they would just spray down the concrete with water so that it didn't dry so quickly and cause an issue for the cement. So when cement cures too fast, it becomes weaker, and so we want it to cure at a certain rate, and the primer keeps it from curing too fast. It also is a bonding agent for the self-leveling underlayment to stick to the floor.
Okay.
So the primer is going in between the concrete and the self-leveler. You're using that to marry the two.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay.
So if they mix them,
Right.
that's
Now
not
it's
gonna
spread
work.
throughout.
You thought you were being clever.
Those brownies don't taste good.
Yeah, that's right.
You should always use a primer. Is that what I'm hearing?
Always.
Does anything need to go, once you've self-leveled, does anything need to go on top of that before you start installing your floor?
In most cases, no. So if they're going to add another layer of self-leveling, we would have them prime that.
Sure.
Otherwise, no, it should be ready for finished floor covering.
Okay.
There are some cases where gypsum self-leveling, they will, if you have a gypsum, I guess not a polymer modified product, but let's say, a lot of low-rise condominium projects will utilize what we call gypcrete or gypsum underlayment. Those particular products are not necessarily the same as what we sell at T&A Supply. Those products do end up being very porous, and we want to use some type of product over those to really keep that porosity before we put down finished floor covering or any other type of product, because they when they dry, they're very, very porous.
What is the difference between gypcrete and concrete?
So gypcrete is made out of gypsum. And then, of course, it's got additives. So they call it, I think in some cases they'll call it gypsum concrete, but it's really gypsum underlayment. Generally poured anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to 1.25 inches over a wood substrate. And it's used as really a fire retardant as well, so that you don't have a 5-story building that's just plywood. You've got all of this 3/4 to 1.25 inches of a gypsum product, and it's not in any way cement. So it's they call it gypsum cement, but it acts the same way. You mix it with water, it hardens, but it's not made out of concrete or Portland cement products.
Can you do self-leveling on gypcrete?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
It's just a yes.
You just hear
There's
those-
nothing else to say, Michael.
I know for me, just being fully candid, a long time ago, I used to, what's the difference between gypcrete and concrete? And you hear those, they just get thrown around and no one ever explains them because everybody's supposed to just know what they are. But do they act the same? Are they the same type of thing? So you can pour concrete deeper or more concrete. Gypsum is usually just poured to 1.25 inches at the max.
So there's modified gypsum underlayments, and then there's what we see, day to day in a low-rise wood structure. The low-rise wood structure utilizes what we call gypsum cement or gypsum underlayment. It's not made to go very thin. They mix it on site, so they're actually pouring bags of gypsum, this product that's modified, into a large mixing pump. And then they add sand, with a little dozer, and then they add water, and then they pump it up there. And so there's a lot of things that can happen on site. I've seen so many types of buildings that are very well done and have great products. Unfortunately, they didn't call me to the good ones. They called me to the ones that weren't so good. And so what I usually saw was gypsum underlayments in low rise that was failing or that had issues or that was not level or didn't have a very good surface. And so we were there to repair it. But in most cases, it can be done very effectively. And I hope I see some of those sometime. but nobody wants me to see those.
Right.
So, you weren't meant to see those.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Yeah.
Are there any generic industry problems regarding subfloor prep that we haven't talked about that you think like we need to also just throw this out here? This is something that happens all the time and it just needs to be done differently.
It's becoming more mainstream, but so often we don't realize what can happen if the floor is not smooth. If the floor is not flat. And it's something that we're not going to see. If I'm a building owner, I want to put my money in the best place, and that's going to be with the best product, with the best finish, with the best visuals and all of those things. And what goes underneath, that's not that important. We're not going to see it anyway. And so what we've seen as a trend is that floors that are not flat, that are not smooth, are showing imperfections in that finished floor and can cause an issue. Ceramic tile is getting larger and larger. I think it used to be where we would see a 12 by 12 or a 13 by 13 tile and we'd go, wow, look at that. I've actually seen 4 by 8 sheets of tile and, go down. And so with a large tile like that floor has to be very, very flat. Otherwise the edges, we have lippage, we have issues. And so, and not only that, but it doesn't look good. And so we're realizing that the smooth, flat floor is a standard that we must have to have a successful, nice looking floor. So I was on a high rise in Honolulu, Hawaii. These condos were selling from anywhere from $3 million to I think the penthouse was $80 million. And so the expectation was that when you walk in, the trim looked perfect. The door swung open and that gap on the door was perfect. And the trim was the same height all the way around the room. And the floor was flat. And everything was as good as workmanship as it could be done. And so that floor needed to be flat. Then when we go into the commercial world, smooth is important. So if we've got, bumps and undulation in a surgery room or an operating room, that can break through. And I used to know the daily charge on a surgery room, I want to say it was $50,000 per day that the room generates for the hospital. And so, having to replace those things or repair the substrate prep is very important so that they don't have any issues down the road where something would break through or crack the vinyl or cause any other issues with the finished floor covering.
Smooth and flat. Yep. Damn it. It must be done.
I'm just amazed. I mean, it just seems like it's so important. And like you said, it helps the job go so much easier. You have less issues, less callbacks, all these things. And yet it's something that's just not talked about enough. I mean, I think to your point, it is getting talked about more and becoming more popular. And we could save ourselves so much time if we just do it well the first time.
I see so many more people that are much more educated on floor prep. When I first started, I would be talking with a group of installers who had never used self-leveling underlayment, didn't really want to. And the last thing that any of us wants to do is go out to a project and do something that we've never done before when we might have been a flooring professional for 20 years. And so once they had that information and realized that it could make their job easier, it made the finished floor better, it solved all these problems, we see more and more people do it. I actually have a good friend that had never used self-leveling underlayment, and he's a tile setter. We did a couple jobs together, basement of a home, and a couple. And now I mean, he must be on his 10th truckload. He looks for opportunities to use that, but he's also seen that his finish installation can be so much easier, so much faster, and so much better by utilizing those products. And they really have become a very important part of us at T&A in order to have those products and make sure that we have them available for our customer.
So if we have a customer listening and they're going, hey, I need to get my guys trained, how would they find out about some of these trainings you talk about? What's the best way for them to get connected with that?
At the branch, we try to do our best in advertising when those trainings are coming. Okay. Generally every year at any branch, within our footprint, we have what we call a customer appreciation day or a vendor fair where we invite a lot of our key vendors to those events, and they can sign up or talk to the rep. We encourage our customers to seek out their local rep, manufacturing. We a lot of times will put them in touch. We want them to be trained and educated in any of these products so that they can be successful. That was my favorite part of the job. I can tell you one of the first experiences I had as a rep for the manufacturer that I worked for was we were doing a VA hospital in Tacoma, Washington. I had gone to just kind of present the product, and I said, well, why don't you just pick an area, a room, and it was a disaster. I mean, the place was, first of all, it was a dream for me because the concrete was a mess.
Right.
And so I could go anywhere and fix something. And so we decided on a particular room, and we self-leveled the whole room, and I worked with their group and really had a good time because they found it, very easy to use. And when we left, it looked like a very smooth lake, still wet. And I came back the next morning, and the gentleman that I had been working with the most, he looks at me and he goes, hey, come here. And he just falls to his knees on the floor that we had done the day before. And he says, you just got to feel this. It's so smooth. and I started laughing, and he looked at me and he says, you already know that. I'm such an idiot. He says, we really like this product. And it was just, it was time after time after time that those things were just like, people were excited to learn something new. They were really thankful that you would take the time to show them. And then, of course, to see the difference that they had, whether it was a retirement home that I helped somebody with. I can think of, the high-rise projects that we did here in Seattle, or even actually had a gentleman called me. He had purchased a product at a home center, and he needed leveling, and the company would not do it. And he said that he just wanted to know. So I gave him several names of contractors. He called me back, and I was a rep at the time. He says, I can't get any of these guys to come and help me. And so on a Saturday, I took my two sons, and we went and we self-leveled his living room. Anyway, it was just great because the guy was so thankful, and he was so happy, and it was just like, I liked doing it. So it was no big deal for me. But just to solve the problems, substrate prep solves problems. Right. And whether it's moisture, whether it's just the floor being out of spec or not level. I can remember we did a Dick's Sporting Goods in Tacoma at the Tacoma Mall. It looked like a war zone. The floor had been chipped up in many places. I couldn't imagine how they were ever going to have a retail establishment there. We worked with them. We showed them what we could do. And at the right time, we helped the contractor pour the product. And it turned out perfect. They laid the finished floor covering, and it's just a job well done. We look back and we see that Dick's Sporting Goods was happy. The contractor was happy. We were happy that we were able to service the customer. So I love it. If anybody ever wants to talk about substrate prep, I can't always get somebody to listen because I think there's probably other things that are more exciting to talk about. Not for me, but for you. I mean, I know Holiday's excited to talk about marketing in most cases. Always. I'm sure you will bend my ear on hardwood. Mm-hmm. And substrate prep has always been that thing where I've been able to work with the customer on it. So I'm always happy to help with that. And it's been so fun. For me, it's always been like watching a home improvement show. I get to see the before, which was really ugly, should tear it down. And I get to see the after, which is, a finished project that turned out very well. And in most cases, that's the way they turned out very well. Only for that list of disasters that you were talking about earlier, there are a few things, but for the most part, always been able to help.
That's awesome. Always reach out to a branch because we always have people that can help. Look out for those events that we do. But if you are in dire need or just really want to have somebody train you, reach out to us and we'll find you somebody.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have vendors that are excited and happy to do that. We just need those willing participants. Cool.
I want to talk more specifically about products. We sell a lot of things here at T&A Supply, and I would love to know more about which ones you would recommend. And I know that there's a lot of them. So if you have what are the go-to ones? I'm going to make the jump. We need to do self-leveling. Where do they start? What are the main products that they would be the go-tos?
We do carry multiple manufacturers, but one of our manufacturers that's been key and that I worked for is Utzine. They've got a range of self-leveling underlayments, a range of patching compounds. We sell a product called 888 for a patching. The product has really become our go-to for just about everything. We used to say that there was a primer already in it because it is polymer modified and sticks to just about anything. They say it'll still stick to glass, and that's what we advertised when I first started. So obviously bonds very well. Self-leveling wise, we go through a lot of 150 self-leveling. I see pallets go out the door so often that the trucks just seem to show up with product and they leave as quickly as they come. So there's a lot of people using that product. It's got great open time. We talked about that earlier, meaning we can work with it for a long period of time. I used to tell guys that it makes an amateur look like an expert. And so because it's got some qualities that allow for longer time and is truly self-leveling, it's been a very, very popular product for T&A Supply. So, and then, of course, a wide range of products that really meet more specific type of projects. We carry them all. We carry the entire Utzine line. We also carry some products from Laticrete that do hit certain areas and specific projects. We will help you find the right product.
Lots of options.
Yeah. I think this is a great start to subfloor prep and leveling and kind of getting us to where we need to be. And we can always do a follow-up. But this is super helpful, Jim. I appreciate you taking the time to educate us.
Yeah. And certainly there are people that are more educated on these types of products than I. And so we can always point you the right direction if it gets out of our range. But happy to be here. Thank you. Awesome. And hopefully this will inspire somebody maybe to do something that they've not done before. Self-level.
Yes.
Patch.
Yes.
Yeah.
The challenge is out there.
I'm feeling like maybe this weekend I find myself a project.
Fire in the hole!
Since we have Jim here, Michael,
Yep.
I think we just on the spot do a fire in the hole.
That's perfect.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Yes. I like it.
So, Jim, you said you had a category you wanted to promote today. What do you want to talk about?
Yes, I want to make sure that our listeners know that we carry a wide variety of ceramic installation products. I think so many of our customers have known us for the things that we've always carried: tack strip and padding and base, rubber base, and heat tape and staples and all of those things that they come into their local branch and buy every day. But many do not know, that we carry a wide variety of installation products for the ceramic industry, whether it be thin sets, multiple types of thin set for many types of installation, tools for the trade, so many tools for large format tile, tools that will help disperse the thin set, for the large panels that we're seeing put in. We're seeing panels that go up that are as large as, like we talked about earlier, 4x8. So, where a single shower wall is just one piece of tile. And so in order to disperse that tile or even to pick up that, we'll use suction cups to hold that. We'll use suction cups that will vibrate to disperse the ceramic tile adhesives or the thin sets. And so those are all carried at T&A Supply. And I've run into some customers that weren't aware of that. We carry a full line of ceramic trim, a full line of grouts in every color that Laticrete offers in multiple types of products. So we carry bucket grouts, we carry epoxies, we carry Portland cement grouts. Anything that is needed for the installation of ceramic tile, you'll find it at T&A Supply. Shower systems. Multiple brands of shower systems from Weddy to Laticrete. Go Board is stocked in a lot of our locations. We also carry multiple types of drains for that category. Everything that is needed for that installation. In-floor heat. So if we want to warm our toes, once you've had that, you'll never go back. Just a quick warning. But we carry that. And we've got the knowledge behind that. If you walk into one of our branches and you ask about these things, they'll know what you'll need, the products that you'll need to have a successful installation. So many times, again, we're known for tack strip, heat tape, the basics of carpet and vinyl installation or VCT installation or LVT installation. But so many of our customers don't know that we carry a wide variety of ceramic installation products.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I was so amazed at the amount of sundry items we carried when I first came here. I mean, it just blew me away. And then to find out how big of a piece of our business that it is, it's a very important part of our business. We want to make sure we hit that community as much as possible.
And we don't sell any finished ceramic tile anymore. We used to quite a while ago. So it's kind of one of those things you forget about. We have everything that you could possibly need to install it. We have it in our branches, and you can walk in and pick it up that day.
And in most cases, you can do it very quickly. So sometimes there are challenges, with going to some of our competitors where it takes, maybe an hour or so to get those products. We'll have you in and out in a jiffy, and we just want to make sure that you've got everything you need for that project. So we're really working hard to let people know what we have as far as our merchandising and marketing within the branch. So often we're so used to knowing what we have that we forget that maybe some of our new customers don't know when they walk in that door what we have available to them. And so this is a great opportunity to let them know that we carry so many products in that category.
Well, thanks for participating in our on-the-spot fire in the hole.
Fire in the hole!
Wrapping this up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jim, for coming in and chatting with us.
I don't know. We'll see.
I'm
I'm sure I'll be critical, but
You'll be amazed at the power of editing.
Oh, great,
Trust me.
yeah.
My first mini, I was like, I suck at this.
oh, jeez, yeah. And I think you guys are great. So good editing.
There you go. Good editing.
But I wish I could do that with some of my presentations.
Right.
Yeah.
I can remember. I forgot where I was one time, and just like and you just like everything goes away.
Right. Yeah.
Everything went away. I can remember looking at about 25 people going,
What am I talking
"Who am
about?
I? What am I doing here?" It's like,
Where am
I just transported here somehow. Who are you people? But that hasn't happened for a while. So.
That's good. You're getting more sleep these days.
Yeah, that's right.
No, well done.
All right. What the Floor is a T&A Supply Company, Inc. original production. You can find out more about us at tasupply.com or tasflooring.com.
This show was produced by Jose Morales with help from Tony Collier and Paul Van Arum, hosted by Holiday Van Arum and Michael Gurria.
Tell us what you think of the show by emailing us at WTFpodcast@tasupply.com or find us on social media, #WhatTheFloorPodcast.